Hey, what's going on guys? I'm Nick Gray, and today we are doing a smartphone comparison between the all-new OnePlus 8 Pro and comparing that to the LG V60. Now, these two devices are probably the most similar flagship devices when it comes to their prices for 2020, with a lot of similarities between the two devices, but also some unique differences which set them apart. But before we get to that, I'd like to remind you to subscribe to the channel and hit that bell icon as well. I've got a lot more OnePlus 8 Pro coverage coming up, so make sure you stay tuned for that. With that out of the way, let's jump in to see which of these two devices you should actually buy. I'm going to start things off with the main specifications of both of these devices, since that's where they are the most similar. Powering both of these devices is the Snapdragon 865 processor, which is incredibly powerful if you're looking to game on the go or if you're simply looking to get work done. They also both have 8 gigabytes of RAM, though the OnePlus 8 Pro does have an option to go all the way up to 12 gigabytes. As far as storage goes, both devices also have 128 gigabytes, though the OnePlus 8 Pro again can be upgraded to 256 gigabytes. And then as far as their displays go, you're looking at 6.8 inches on both devices, though the one on the OnePlus 8 Pro is slightly smaller at 6.78 inches. But the display here is a Quad HD resolution, which is a lot higher than the Full HD Plus resolution on the LG V60. The LG also doesn't have the same refresh rate that the OnePlus 8 Pro does have. This has a refresh rate that goes all the way up to 120 Hz at its full resolution, while the LG V60 maxes out at 60 Hz refresh rate. On the inside, both of these phones also have extremely large batteries, but the LG V60 comes out on top with a 5,000 mAh cell, which honestly could get most people through 2 full days without needing to charge up the device. And it also has wireless charging. The same goes for the OnePlus 8 Pro wireless charging, but it actually has a unique wireless charging system that OnePlus has put together that can charge it at 30 watts, making it one of the fastest wireless charging systems that we've seen to date. The only difference here though is that the 4,500 mAh battery cell is slightly smaller, but you'll still get a full day or even a day and a half on a single charge with this device. So far, I've highlighted a lot of similarities between these two devices, but now it's time to talk about the things that really set them apart. The main one is the camera system. On the back of the OnePlus 8 Pro, you get a quad camera setup with two 48 megapixel sensors for the standard and its ultra wide camera. It also has an 8x optical or hybrid zoom camera, and then finally a color filter camera that's a 5 megapixel sensor. Now that last one is a throwaway camera, simply so that OnePlus could say that they have a quad camera setup, but the other cameras actually do a pretty decent job. They're still a half step behind what we've seen from Samsung and LG this year, but honestly it's a huge improvement for OnePlus, for any OnePlus fans who've been longing for a smartphone camera that can actually keep up with the competition. Now, switching over to the LG V60, you only get a triple camera setup on the back of this phone with a 64 megapixel main sensor, 13 megapixel ultra wide, and then finally a time of flight sensor for capturing depth information. But while there's not a dedicated camera and sensor for zoom, LG is actually using the 64 megapixel sensor for hybrid zoom up to 2x. And this phone can also record up to 8K video and 4K 60 FPS from its main cameras on the back of the phone and also the front-facing camera. As far as the OnePlus 8 Pro goes, you do get 4K video capture at 60 frames per second from the main cameras, and then only 1080p from the main 16 megapixel camera. And then switching back over to the LG, of course, you get a 10 megapixel front-facing camera. Now, as far as capturing images go, the LG V60 does come out on top just by a hair when using the rear cameras in order for capturing photos. But the OnePlus 8 Pro does have the slight advantage when capturing video, especially since it's using electronic and optical image stabilization at the same time while recording. As far as front-facing cameras go though, the LG V60 doesn't have what it takes in order to keep up with the OnePlus 8 Pro. And that brings us to the software experience. Now, if you've been using OnePlus devices over the years, you already know how good the software experience is on OnePlus phones. The Oxygen OS custom build that's on top of Android 10 is pretty much stock Android, with quite a few customization options that are built in that honestly don't get in the way but actually give you a way to make it look and feel like it's your own device. On top of that, they've also included the Google feed to the left of the home screen, replacing the regular shelf that they've had for all these years. Personally, I would choose the software experience that OnePlus has to offer even over what Google's been doing on its Pixel devices. By contrast, the software experience on the LG V60 is one of my least favorite from an Android manufacturer that sells smartphones here in the US. It's slow, buggy, unintuitive, and honestly feels like it's something that should have come out 2 to 3 years ago. One simple example is that the app drawer on the default launcher even has a hard time just keeping apps loaded alphabetically, which honestly should be extremely simple. And on top of that, the phone is completely loaded down with bloatware, especially the carrier versions that are sold here in the US. But LG does have a couple advantages with the V60 that the OnePlus 8 Pro simply doesn't have. The main one being its 3.5mm headphone jack, a feature that honestly is extremely rare, especially in flagship devices these days. On top of that, it's also using LG's legendary quad DAC system for enhancing the audio experience. And honestly, if you've used an LG smartphone with a pair of high-end headphones and really good audio files, you'll know that this is probably the best experience as far as consuming audio in a smartphone that there currently is. Now, the other feature that the V60 has over the OnePlus 8 Pro or pretty much any other device that's on the market is its unique dual screen case. Now, this is a $100 add-on, but honestly, this puts the phone into the same category as most foldable devices like the Huawei Mate X and the Samsung Galaxy Fold. The dual screen is the perfect tool for heavy multitaskers, allowing you to have your email open with a browser window right next to it, or even play a game on one screen while watching a video on the other. As far as design goes, I don't think anybody's going to argue that the V60 is a better looking device than the OnePlus 8 Pro. Especially when looking at the back of the V60, since it looks like it was simply ported from last year's Samsung Galaxy S10 Plus. That being said, the curved display on the front of the OnePlus 8 Pro does make it significantly harder to use than if they were using a flat screen, especially when typing, trying to hit the keys on the side of the screen, or even pressing buttons that are close to the edge. On top of that, the extra glare that you get when using the phone in portrait mode while watching videos or playing games is extremely infuriating. And that brings us to the price, which is the final item in this comparison. While you might think that it's easy to compare prices of devices, it honestly is a little bit hard with the LG V60 since the phone ranges from $800, which is cheaper than the OnePlus 8 Pro, but it goes all the way up to $950. And that price range varies based off of the service provider that you purchase the phone from. As for the OnePlus 8 Pro, it starts at $899 for the base model with 8GB of RAM and 128GB of storage, but then goes up to $999 if you want 12GB of RAM and 256GB of storage. So with all that being said, which of these two smartphones should you actually buy? Well, after using these two devices side by side for 3 to 4 days now, I would say I would walk away with the OnePlus 8 Pro. And the main reason for that isn't the processor or the performance or anything like that. It's because OnePlus has an incredible software experience, which makes the phone a pleasure to use, while using the LG V60 just leaves me a little bit more frustrated than I should be with a flagship smartphone in 2020. So, now that you know which device I would pick between the OnePlus 8 Pro and the LG V60, let me know which device you would choose. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one.